The envelope didn't look like much. That was the thing I kept coming back to, sitting in that lawyer's office with the ceiling fan turning slow overhead and my son-in-law's voice still echoing in my head from 3 days before. "Just let it go, Dad. There's nothing there worth chasing." But there it was. A plain white envelope, edges gone soft with age, my name written on the front in my wife's handwriting. Marion's handwriting. And Marion had been gone for 4 years. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's a habit I've had my whole life. Let me back up. My name is Clifford Haynes. I'm 63 years old, and I spent 31 of those years driving a propane delivery truck through the hill country of central Tennessee. Up before dawn, home after dark, 5 days a week and sometimes 6. It's not glamorous work. You smell like gas no matter how clean you shower, and your lower back starts sending you complaints around 50 that it doesn't stop sending until you're dead. But I never missed a payment, never borrowed what I couldn't return, and I raised 2 daughters in a house that was paid off by the time the younger one graduated high school. My wife Marion was the one who held the financial side of things together. Not because I couldn't handle it. I balanced our checkbook every month to the penny. But because Marion had a gift for it. She'd grown up watching her father lose a farm to bad decisions and a worse banker, and she swore from the time she was 16 that she would never let money slip through her fingers the way it had slipped through his. She kept a ledger. Paper, not computer. Green columns, blue ink. Every household expense logged by category. Every receipt filed by month. When she got her cancer diagnosis in the spring of 2019, the first thing she said to me after the doctor left the room was, "I need to go over the files with you." I told her we had time. She gave me a look I'd seen before, the one that meant, "Don't mistake patience for infinity." Marion passed 14 months after that diagnosis. Quietly in the back bedroom on a morning in July when the light came through the curtains the color of old honey. She'd planned her own funeral, contacted the church, spoken to the lawyer, updated the will. She'd organized her death the way she'd organized our entire married life, methodically, without complaint, making sure the people she loved wouldn't have to scramble. What she didn't tell me, what I didn't find out until much later, was that she'd also made one additional arrangement. Something separate. Something she'd deliberately kept apart from everything else. But I'm getting to that. The first year after Marion was gone, my younger daughter Blythe and her husband came to stay. Ostensibly to help me grieve, to make sure I was eating right, that sort of thing. Blythe is warm-hearted. She always has been. But her husband, a man named Stellan who sold commercial real estate and had opinions about everything, had a particular interest in my finances that I initially mistook for concern. It started small. He asked about the mortgage. Paid off, I told him. He asked about the truck. Paid off. He asked about savings, about retirement accounts, about what Marion had left behind. I answered honestly because he was family, and I thought that meant something. What I didn't notice at the time, couldn't notice, because grief does something to your peripheral vision, was that Blythe had grown quieter every time Stellan asked these questions. She'd leave the room, refill her coffee, come back with her eyes slightly averted. I noticed it later. I filed it away without knowing why. My older daughter, June, lived in Knoxville, 2 hours east. She called every Sunday morning, the same time she'd called since she moved out at 22. She didn't ask about money. She asked about me. Whether I was sleeping, whether I'd gone back to playing cards with the men from my old route, whether I'd fixed the screen door that had been warped since the spring flood 2 years ago. June had always been more like Marion. Practical. Careful. She listened more than she talked. 6 months after Marion passed, I found the first thing. I was cleaning out the closet in the back hallway, the deep one, the kind old houses have that seem to go back farther than the wall should allow. Marion had used it for off-season storage, winter coats, Christmas boxes, the set of luggage we'd taken on our one real vacation, to Savannah the summer we turned 50. On the top shelf behind a stack of old shoe boxes was a metal tin with a rubber band around it, the kind a fruitcake comes in at Christmas. Inside was a passbook, old style, the kind banks stopped printing 30 years ago. The cover was dark blue, worn smooth at the corners, with the name of a savings institution I didn't recognize printed in faded gold letters. I almost put it back. Something stopped me. I'm not sure what. Probably the fact that Marion didn't keep things without reason. If this tin was in that closet, on that shelf, behind those boxes, it was there on purpose. I brought it to the kitchen table and looked at it under the light. The account number was printed inside the front cover. Below it, in Marion's careful blue ink, she had written 4 words, Clifford, go see Harland. Harland Voss was our family attorney, had been for over 20 years. He'd handled our wills, our deed, the sale of Marion's mother's property after she passed. He was 71 years old, drove a 10-year-old Buick, and kept a dish of butterscotch candies on his desk that I'd never once seen him eat. I didn't call ahead. I drove to his office the next morning. On the way, my phone rang. Blythe. Hey, Daddy, where are you headed so early? I told her I was running errands. Stellan was wondering if you'd found anything else going through Mom's things. Any old accounts or anything. He says sometimes people have things tucked away that need to be dealt with properly. I kept my voice easy. Nothing interesting. Just old coats. A pause. Okay. Just wanted to check. You know he's happy to help if you need someone to look things over. I said I appreciated it. We hung up. My hands were steady on the wheel, but something in my chest wasn't. That was the first measurement. Harlan's receptionist showed me in without an appointment, which told me he'd been expecting me at some point. He rose when I entered, slower than he used to, and we shook hands in the way of men who have known each other long enough that the handshake means something. I set the passbook on his desk. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at me. "Sit down, Clifford," he said. I sat. He opened a drawer and took out a folder, thick with papers, and set it next to the passbook without opening it. "Marion came to see me about 3 months before she passed," he said. "She had some things she wanted to put in order. Some of it was what you already know about, the will, the property, the accounts you two held jointly. And some of it," he continued, "was this." He opened the folder. Inside were statements, printed copies, organized by date, the account in the passbook. Going back 11 years. The balance was more than I'd earned in the last decade of driving combined. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just looked at the number. "Marion set this up in 2012, Harlan said. "She funded it gradually, over time, from savings she accumulated separately. She told me she'd learned from her father's situation that you never keep everything in one place. That if something went wrong, if someone ever got access to your shared accounts, there needed to be something they couldn't touch." I thought about her father's farm, about the way she'd described watching it disappear. "She didn't tell me," I said. "No," Harlan said. "She said she didn't want you to know. Not because she didn't trust you, because she wanted you to have something that couldn't be argued about or pressured out of you before you knew it existed." I looked at him. Pressured by who? He was quiet for a moment. She had concerns. "About Stellan." The folder was full. Marion had been thorough. Account statements, yes, but also notes. Pages of them, written in the same blue ink as the passbook and description. Dates and conversations she'd had with Blythe. Things Stellan had said about inheritance, about protecting assets, about how older people often made poor financial decisions when they were alone. She'd written it all down. Every exchange, every comment, every casual question that hadn't been casual at all. She'd started in 2013, a year after she opened the account. She'd been watching for 9 years before she died. I put the folder down and pressed my hands flat on the desk and looked out Harlan's window at the parking lot, at the old Buick sitting in the shade of a pin oak. "What do I do?" I asked. Harlan folded his hands. "That depends on what's happened," he said, "which is why I called someone to join us." There was a knock at the door. A woman stepped in, late 40s, short brown hair, a plain blazer. She introduced herself as a detective with the Financial Crimes Division of the State Attorney's Office. Her name was Audra Sewell. She shook my hand and sat down at the side of the desk like she'd been here before, which I suspected she had. "Mr. Haynes," she said, "we've been looking at some activity connected to your late wife's estate. Nothing involving you. But we'd like to ask you a few questions about your son-in-law." She was careful, professional. She explained that a complaint had been filed. She didn't say by whom, but I looked at Harlan and he looked at his hands and I understood. Regarding potential financial exploitation of an elderly widower. Me. The word landed strangely. I didn't feel elderly. I still got up at 5. I still changed my own oil. But I thought about the questions Stellan had been asking for 2 years, and the way he'd started referring to my accounts as the estate before there was anything to administer. And I understood that what I felt didn't change what I was to him. An opportunity. Sewell asked me not to confront anyone. Not Stellan, not Blythe. Not until they understood the full scope of what had happened. She was kind about it, but she was clear. I drove home through the hills with the windows down, the smell of cut grass and red clay coming in off the fields. I'd made this drive 10,000 times. I knew every curve of this road by memory, but that afternoon it felt like the first time I'd really seen it. That night my son-in-law cooked dinner. He'd been doing that lately. Cooking, being helpful, asking me questions over the dishes about whether I'd thought about downsizing the house, whether I'd ever considered a financial manager, whether I knew how complicated estate taxes could get. I answered in short sentences. I thanked him for dinner. I went to bed early and lay in the dark listening to the ceiling fan and thinking about Marion sitting alone at the kitchen table, writing things down in blue ink so that the truth would exist somewhere even if she couldn't say it out loud. She'd been trying to protect me for years before she knew she was dying, and then after the diagnosis, she'd done it faster, more deliberately, making sure the record was complete. I thought about her saying, "Don't mistake patience for infinity." She'd had less of it than either of us knew. She'd used it well. Over the following weeks, I learned patience of a different kind. The kind that requires you to smile across a dinner table at someone you no longer trust, to answer questions without revealing what you know, to act like the ground beneath your feet is solid when you can feel it shifting. Detective Sewell called twice. Both times she said the same thing. We're getting there. Stay normal. Stellan, meanwhile, grew more attentive, more solicitous. He brought me a brochure for a financial planning firm. He offered to help me sort out the paperwork. He mentioned twice that he knew a real estate agent if I ever wanted to think about the house. I thanked him. I filed everything away. June called on Sunday. She asked about the screen door. I told her I'd finally fixed it. Good, she said. Mom would be glad. I didn't tell her what was happening. Not yet. Sewell had been clear about that. But I think June heard something in my voice. That careful steadiness you develop when you're carrying something heavy and don't want to show it. Because she said, before she hung up, "Daddy, you call me if you need me. Anytime." Okay? I told her I would. The morning the warrants were served, I was on the porch with my coffee. Early light, birds loud in the oaks, dew still on the grass. Sewell had told me the night before. I hadn't slept much, but not from dread. More from that feeling you get before something long overdue finally happens. Like barometric pressure changing before rain. My phone buzzed at 7:14. "It's done," Sewell said. "Both of them. Both." I hadn't known until that moment that Blythe was involved directly. I'd suspected Stellan was working alone, that my younger daughter had simply been too close to him to see what he was doing. But Sewell explained carefully that the investigation had found communications between them. Not all of it was Stellan's initiative. Some of the questions and the access they'd attempted to gain to Marion's estate documents, had involved Blythe's cooperation. That was the part that hurt the most, not the money. The money had never been mine in a way that felt real anyway. It was Marion's patience, Marion's sacrifice, Marion's foresight, and eventually it would go to things she'd have wanted it to go to. But Blythe. I sat on that porch for a long time after Sewell hung up, watching the light change and the shadows shorten, and a crow work at something in the grass at the far edge of the yard. I didn't feel righteous. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt the particular loneliness of being the person who turned out to be right about something you desperately wished you'd been wrong about. The case moved faster than I expected. Financial exploitation of a surviving spouse, forgery of estate documents, attempted wire fraud. Stellan's attorney negotiated. Blythe's attorney argued that she'd been under her husband's influence, that she hadn't fully understood what she was participating in. The judge was not persuaded. Stellan received 4 years, plus restitution. Blythe received 18 months of a suspended sentence, probation, and mandatory counseling. The judge said from the bench that he believed her culpability was lesser but not absent, that choosing to look away is still a choice. I don't know if I agree with that entirely. I still think about it. June was in the courtroom with me both days. She sat beside me with her shoulder touching mine and didn't say much. She didn't need to. When the sentences came down, she put her hand over mine on the bench, and I looked at the wall and thought about Marion writing in her ledger at midnight while I slept, not wanting to worry me, just quietly making sure the truth was somewhere safe. Afterward, Harlan called. "There's one more thing," he said, which was beginning to feel like a sentence the man was constitutionally obligated to say. He had an envelope for me. Marion had left it with the folder, to be given after everything was resolved. He'd been holding it for 4 years. I drove back to his office. Same parking lot, same pin oak, same butterscotch candies untouched on the desk. He handed me the envelope and gave me the room to myself. Inside was a single folded page, Marion's handwriting. "Clifford, if you're reading this, then Harlan did his job and you did yours. I knew you would. You always follow through, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I'm sorry I kept this from you. I want you to understand why. Not to excuse it. You know I don't make excuses, but because I think you deserve the honest reason. I was afraid that if you knew, you'd try to handle it yourself. And I knew this wasn't something to handle. It was something to outlast. You outlast things by being patient and keeping records. I also want to say this. Don't let what happened with Blythe be the whole story of your life with her. She made terrible choices, but she's still your daughter. What you do with that is yours to decide, not mine. I won't tell you to forgive. I'll just tell you not to decide in the middle of the grief. The money is yours. Do something honest with it. I love you more than I ever said." Mary and I sat there a long time with the letter in my hands. The ceiling fan turned. A car passed on the street outside. Somewhere in the building a phone rang twice and stopped. When I finally folded the letter and put it back in the envelope, I felt something settle. Not happiness, not relief exactly. Something quieter than either of those. The feeling you get when a long fever finally breaks and the world comes back into its normal proportions. That was 8 months ago. The money took time to untangle, the way these things always do. Harlan handled most of it. When the final accounting came through, I did what Marion told me to do. I did something honest. I funded a small scholarship. At the high school June and Blythe had both attended over in the valley. For students going into skilled trades, mechanics, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, the kind of work that keeps the world running. The kind Marion always said deserved more respect than it got. I kept the house. Fixed the screen door for real this time. Not just the latch, but the whole frame, the way Marion had been after me to do for years. Painted the porch. Planted the garden she never got to plant in the spring of 2020 because the diagnosis came in March and took the season with it. I hear from Blythe sometimes. Letters, mostly. Long ones. They circle around without quite arriving at the center of what happened, the way letters from people in pain often do. I read them. I haven't responded yet. I'm not ready. Maybe I won't be. Or maybe I will someday when the grief has had enough time to settle into something I can see clearly. Marion told me not to sit in the middle of it. I'm still in the middle. June comes down most weekends now. We sit on the porch with coffee and watch the light change over the hills, the way Marion and I used to do. We don't talk about the trial. We talk about the garden, about her kids, about the way the neighbor's dog has decided the far corner of my yard is personally his. It's enough. Most mornings it's more than enough. I still think about Marion at that kitchen table, late at night, writing things down in blue ink. Not out of anger, not out of fear, at least. Not only fear, but because she understood that truth needs a place to live. That if you want it to survive you, you have to give it somewhere to go. She gave it to a tin in the back of a closet, to a passbook with her handwriting inside, to a folder in Harlan Voss's filing cabinet, to a letter that waited 4 years to be read. She gave it to me, and it was enough to finish the job she started.